Number one, and from the top of my head, like I said, just be authentic. Like there's so much content out there. There's so much information. Everybody's doing their own thing. So just stick to your voice. Stick to your story. What are you trying to tell? For me, that would be number one. Just be authentic, and that's where you sit down with yourself and be like, okay, what is my business trying to do for people? How am I different from the rest of the hospitality copywriters or just copywriters in general, in my case? So for me, be authentic and sticking to your voice would be number one.
So, hello and welcome to the Hospitality Leadership Podcast and to another episode where today we welcome Maria Navarro onto the podcast, who many of you may have come across her on LinkedIn, but she is a writer who specializes in the hospitality industry. So today we're going to be talking about what it takes to write copy. And when we talk about copy, we're talking about the written words on any social media posts, any of your promotional products, anything like that. That's copywriting. But we're going to get into that today. So we're going to jump into this episode with Maria Navarro of Maria Writes. So Maria, thank you so much for joining me on the Hospitality Leadership Podcast. How are you?
Thank you, Andy. I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I think we were just talking before we started about some of the content you put out, which is really creative and original, and we're going to get into talking about that today around the hospitality industry. But I want to know first and foremost, what is it about the hospitality industry that inspires you, that inspires you to keep serving us as an industry?
Well, I honestly, and I've said this before a couple of times, hospitality for me was kind of like a discovery. It's not that I knew that I was meant to be in the industry. It's not that I graduated and I said, I'm going to get into hospitality. So it kind of found me in a way in my first job during college. And I just loved the look on people's faces when they saw the final event, or when you're being at front desk and telling them where's your room and just seeing their faces lit up, or when they're in a restaurant. I was like, that was a moment for me when I said I want to be in an industry that does that to people. So that was kind of like how I found my way, and now I'm trying to do the same thing but doing it online without actually seeing people face to face. But that's why and how I wanted to create content that kind of told that same story, as if I was being talking to you face to face.
Yeah, we've mentioned it a couple of times on the podcast, actually, how much of an impact this industry can have on people's lives, and not only our guests but also the people that work in it. It can be a very positive experience for them. But you're right, we are involved in everyone's, the good parts of people's lives, the bad parts of people's lives, but ultimately we're there to create the best memories and the best experiences we can.
Yeah, exactly. And if you've ever worked in this industry, whether it's a coffee shop, a hotel, a restaurant, you know that the people that you work with become your family. You probably spend more
Yeah.
time with them than with your actual family or with your actual, group of friends. So it's so important to find that healthy environment to work in, and like you said, just how much of an impact your life and your words and your actions, even your gestures, have on the rest of your team.
Yeah. So what's your background then? What's your career like to date? Have you,
Yeah,
how
so
did
so
you
my
get involved in hospitality?
Yeah, so like I said, it kind of found me later in the game. I didn't know what I wanted to get into when I was still in high school. My friends were all sending like applications letters. They were all set to what they wanted to do, and I was kind of still lost in the way that I liked a lot of things the same amount. So I was like, I like design and I like marketing and I like this, but I didn't have one set path for me. So I had the chance to go to Canada for a year, and I said I'm gonna focus on improving my English, and I learned French over there. So that was kind of like my year that really helped me found hospitality, and I found it, while traveling, being immersed in a different culture and the languages. I was like, I want something that has to do with all of this. So I went back home and I enrolled in a university. So home is Mexico for me. I'm born and raised in Mexico. So yeah, I did a bachelor in hospitality management, and I did another one with a university online here in the States, business administration. So I did a little bit of both. And then I found a place in Rhode Island. It was a hotel, really nice resort that hired me, or like an internship position to kind of train me in the world of hospitality. And that was manager in training. So that was like my first real experience, like real
Yeah.
job in the industry. So they kind of rotated me through different areas of the hotel. And then since then, I moved to here, New Jersey, and I've worked with a couple different hotels and restaurants, more in the food and beverage area, because that's where I
Hmm.
personally found more like my passion to be in. And then it wasn't until last year, around this time, summertime, where I finally decided to listen to the voice in my head and kind of give my writing a chance, focusing still in this industry.
Yeah. And it was I think it was one of your first articles, wasn't it? Just tell us a bit about that because it really sort of hit the ground
It
and
was,
just went
yeah,
like wildfire.
exactly. That was kind of like, I took it as my sign from the universe that I was meant to just keep doing the writing, because I actually, that first article that you're telling me, Andy, it's why does working in hospitality change you as a person? And it was literally because I was scrolling through my phone and I found that picture that I posted on the article about me eating a slice of pizza sitting in the polishing racks. And I said, I want to write something that I really do feel passionate about and kind of like combine it with my experience in the industry. That was the first time that I ever posted or published anything. So I kind of did it to get over that fear or that like nerve-wracking feeling you get when somebody else reads something that you're writing. So I just did it, and I remember thinking, I don't want to read it again because I'm going to edit it. I'm going to take stuff out. I want it like that. So I posted and I was like, okay, like I did it, let's see how it goes. And it kind of, like you said, it was just like, I guess people started sharing it and commenting and stuff like that. And that was really the article that got me thinking, okay, I actually can do this. And people are responding really well. I felt like there was kind of like a void for a voice that tells this kind of story in the hospitality industry. And because of the feedback that I was getting, I was like, there's so many people out there who feel the same way. You know, we all
Hmm.
know that it's not rainbows and butterflies all the time. We get
Yeah.
it. But there's a lot of people that also see how, magic this industry can be. So that's
Yeah.
the one article that kind of just got me there
Yeah.
in the
I
map
think
for
for
a little bit.
yeah. I think for me it was the image resonated with me because when I seen it I was just like, I recognize this.
Yep. I
I've
think a
been
lot of
there,
people,
you know?
exactly. I think that was like the pull. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. And that's partly what, like, certainly from my mission is we're trying to change how to make it easier for people in the hospitality industry without
Exactly.
obviously trying to gloss over the realities of what it takes a person to
Exactly.
do and the things that we do when we work in this industry. But now you're obviously turning more to like the copywriting side and writing, obviously passionate about it. But just explain to us really what copywriting is when we hear that term. What is it? What do we mean?
So it's funny that you mentioned it, Andy, because honestly, I've heard that term before, but it wasn't until a year ago that I was looking into doing something like this that I
Yeah.
actually understood what it meant. I just really didn't know what a copywriter did, or what is it. So I like to describe it as the art of connecting and persuading someone with just words. So it's writing. It really doesn't have anything else to do. It's not a magic trick that we pull. It's just really being able to use words as a weapon in a good way. So it's
Yeah.
connecting and it's trying to get a reaction, and most of all, or for me at least, an emotion from somebody who reads what we do. So it's not just informative, it's not just an article that tells you statistics or stuff like that. You got to get that feeling out of people. So that's what we basically try and do.
Yeah, it's very emotion based and driven. I know a lot
Exactly.
of people get confused with copywriting in the sense of talking about rights and, copying people's
Exactly.
work. And this is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about uh, being a wordsmith, essentially, is using words to influence people, very similarly to how, and again, leaders influence people through their words, spoken word, written word. But this is more what you're talking about is specifically targeting guests, potential guests, or in
Exactly.
in your case now also people who are employed in the industry.
Exactly. And that's something that's really important, or that at least I try and get across from my writing. And I've mentioned this in another time. I felt like there was a lot of things or articles out there that just targeted, like you said, guests, or just stay with us and our hotel is the best and blah, blah, blah. But nobody was targeting us. Like nobody was targeting
Yeah.
the people who work behind the scenes. Nobody was targeting every kind of employee. So I kind of wanted to make people feel like they're not alone in that way, and be
Yeah.
like, hey, I get the struggle, I get you're tired, but here's a good thing about it. Or maybe talking to somebody who's, like you said, a leader in a company, CEO, or an employer, somebody different other than the guest. Because if we've worked in the industry, we've been, the two sides of the table. We've been a
Yeah.
guest and we've also been working. But for people who maybe have not had the chance to work in hospitality and they read or they come across some of my posts, maybe they're going to change a little bit their perspective and be like, hey, I never thought about it this way. So I
Yeah.
kind of target different kinds of people through, like you said, just the writing.
Yeah. And if we're telling stories about what it is like to work in hospitality, we've all had, that typical guest or that customer that we don't want to ever come back again. But this is that, you're talking about the realities of what it takes to provide the experience that they get. And, you're right. If they read an article like one of yours, which, shows that side of things, there's that element of respect that we're hopefully will spark
Exactly.
in them, and actually next time they'll think differently before they
Yeah,
treat someone
exactly.
disrespectfully.
Yeah, at the end of the day, and I've said this before as well, empathy is like the biggest thing from guests and from us people in the industry, is just putting ourselves in other people's shoes for 1 minute, and that's going to be enough to make you see things and appreciate things in a different way.
Yeah. The other side of the coin as well is that this, when we are showing what goes on behind the scenes, we're able to create connection with potential employees as well. We're showing them
Exactly.
what it's like to work here. Obviously the positives and the negatives. We don't want to always hide the
Yeah,
negatives,
yeah.
and is that part of your strategy that you're producing now?
It is absolutely, and it's also based on my own experience. Like I said, I wasn't really sure of what I wanted to do, and I kind of found this industry. But for people who maybe are second guessing, or they might have a different perception of what this industry can be, what they can do, just for them to know that there's all this, it's a pool of possibilities joining this industry. You can go so many different ways. And the fun thing is you can try different things. Like you can work in hotels, you can work in restaurants, you can be wedding planner, you can do copywriting for the industry. There are so many ways that you can go in this industry. And I feel like people need to know that it's more than just, oh, a summer job, or, however they end up in this industry. There's so many different things that you can do if you join this industry. So it's definitely a part of what I try to also convey for people who might be second guessing. And like I said, it's incredible to see kind of feedback and reactions from people within the industry that have told me, your article reminded me why I started in this industry. Like this is what I work for. They kind of feel like reinforced in a way, and that's so nice to know that people might feel like that. That's the goal. That's the ultimate goal for the rating.
Now, when we again talking about copywriting as a skill, why is it so important that hospitality business in particular embrace developing that skill with whoever is creating the copy, whether it's social media posts, whether it's, traditional media advertising? Why do we need to really focus in? What's the importance of getting our copywriting right?
What I try to explain, my clients or my potential clients, or just people who ask me just the exact same question, I try to make them see the importance of being, like I said in the beginning, not being able to be face to face, but still feel like as if we were talking face to face. And that's just being creative, but also authentic and relatable for people. I want them to see a post and feel like I'm talking to you, Andy, specifically you, and not just targeting, like I said, a random person or just an overall generalized section of people. So I feel like the importance of hospitality itself, not just online, it's about the human touch. It's about the human connection. It's about, like I said, pulling a string by reading something. So if we do it online now without being face to face, our words are the only thing we have to communicate. You can have a great design, but if what you're saying it's not matching up, then you might lose the point that you're trying to get across. So I always try to say something authentic and something that can relate to people and make it very personalized so that people feel, oh, like she knows me, or like, oh, she's talking to me. So that kind of connection, it's so important when it comes to any hospitality business.
Yeah. And what's your process then when you're thinking through whatever it is you're producing? What's the general process that you go through? What are you thinking about? What are you considering when you're pulling together your plan or your outline?
So what I do for my personal business, in this case, my blogs or my social media content, I always think about what I would have liked somebody else to tell me when I was starting in the industry. So I really just go back to that picture and like memories that I have when I still was kind of like nervous and unsure. And I was like, why is nobody telling me this or showing me this? So I like to put myself in those shoes and be like, okay, what would I have liked for somebody else to tell me, or for me to know before I went through this process of, being a manager or a supervisor or something like that. So, like I said, it's just about being brought back by memories and experiences that can now create or be inspirational to somebody else. So I always try and think of things that I would have liked to know. And then my inspiration for the social media posts, honestly, it comes in the most random ways, in the most random places. I was calling, which I was on her podcast 2 weeks ago. She was like, "How do you come up with these things? Like, how do you create a post that says that hospitality is like a bug bite and the symptoms?" I was like, I saw an ad on TV for bug spray, and then my brain just related that to hospitality. So it kind of just it's a circle of past experiences and just being able to motivate someone else through them.
Yeah. Now, on that point, and I know it's just something I struggle with because you're right, the inspiration for content, whatever it is, comes in the strangest of places. How do you capture that? Have you got a process? Do you jump on it straight away and do you start creating in the moment, or do you have somewhere where you write it down? What do you do?
So it comes and goes in different ways. And something that I love about just being a copywriter and still learn about this is that you never stop learning, and there's so many different ways to go about it. But what personally works for me is I write down in a notebook, like I'm a pen and paper kind of girl. I write my random ideas and then I sit down and I think about what the image could be, because I like to match it with the idea that goes with it. So I just have a list. I literally have a list of things that I say, okay, this week we're gonna do this. This month it's gonna be about this. But I just write them down and kind of match them with my ideas. And for the blogs and things like that, it's the same thing. I always come up with the title first, and it's so weird because it's usually the hardest part. But once I get the title, I'm like, I know what this is gonna be about. So it's different, depending on what I'm creating, but it's usually like that. So writing things down.
Yeah, I think usually my inspiration comes when I'm either driving or doing something where I can't, you know, take a note straight away. So
Exactly.
I'm still nailing it down, but I'm embracing voice memos and Siri on my iPhone to try and just help me.
Exactly. Yeah, it could
So
even
what
be when I'm walking my dog and I'm like, oh my God, and you're like the most random places, you'll get an idea.
yeah. Now when we're thinking about the goals and the outcomes of what we're trying to achieve from them, what is there any process that you have to choose the right goal is what I'm asking. Is there what influences the outcome of a piece? Is it do you do that before? Do you have a goal to start with and then create the content around it? Or do you create the content and then almost see what the outcome or the goal could be from it? How does that work for you?
So it works different depending on the person, the business, the client. And that's one thing that I always ask, even when they schedule an introduction call, I ask, what is your goal for working with a copywriter? Because that is the most important thing to do. And I've had people who have told me, I want to increase my number of followers or readers or clicks. And then there are people who have told me, we've already have a strong following. We don't care about getting this, but we want quality content. So it's just really, it really depends on what each person or each business is looking for. In my personal case, like I said, I just try to create content that people feel good about seeing on their feeds, even if it's 5 seconds when they're scrolling down. And that is my goal. And that kind of organically gave me the, let's call it, publicity, because people share
Mm.
it and people like it, and just, that wasn't my
Yeah.
original goal. I just wanted to create content,
Yeah.
but that kind of led into me getting a stronger following or audience now. So it really depends for each case, but mostly it's just about creating quality content that speaks to people.
And if you were advising someone, you know, obviously we've got hospitality leaders listening to this podcast, is it that they should be choosing that goal? Is it easier to choose a goal first and then to create content around that? Or should they be a little bit more organic in the process?
I think it could work and it will work both ways because I've seen it before with, like I said, different clients that I've worked with so far. But I found it that it's easier when somebody already has a goal in mind or just, an objective. They're like, you know what, we want to reach this so that I can focus more on the end goal instead of just thinking about the process. But I've worked with people who honestly, and like openly, they're like, honestly, I really don't know what I'm looking for. I love your content and I love your writing, so I want to see what it can bring to my business. And that's totally fine too, because they just want to
Yeah.
bring a different voice or a different, like I said, quality content. And then they reach their goal and they're like, oh, we had 100 new followers, or this happened, or somebody reached back. So it works both ways, but it depends on the person again or the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we've got to the point of deciding whether, well, if we're either writing to meet a specific goal or not. But when it comes to actually creating the content, what would you suggest would be, because there's loads of frameworks out there, isn't there, for writing copy, that people can dive into, and we could have a whole episode on those different
Yeah.
frameworks. But what are the fundamental elements that people need to include in their copy to make sure that they're effective, engaging, ultimately quality content?
So what we usually call in the copywriting world or business is a CTA, which is call to action. So that is our primarily goal, and that's what I like to work with whoever I'm working with at the time. Is like, what do you want people to do? Is it subscribing to a list? Is it clicking on a blog? Or, there's so many different things. So it all revolves around what your CTA is going to be. So, like I said, if you just want quality content, then you're going to put up something that is interesting enough for people to share and read through it. But it all depends on what is your end goal. At the end of the day, it's
Hmm.
it's the same thing that we've been talking about. But in terms of copy, I would say, and just from experience, I'm no expert. I'm still learning, and I'm gonna be learning, every single day. But it's a title that is huge. That is the first thing people read. That is the first thing that they're gonna see when you share it online. So within the title and the image that you get, first paragraph, that's the hook. That's what gets people to keep reading or not. That's where I like to be super personable and, like I said, feel that I'm talking to you, Andy.
Hmm.
And then, like I said, at the end, you're gonna have to call to action. In my case, in my personal blogs and stuff, I don't necessarily tell people subscribe to my list or like hire me. That's not my goal. My goal is for them to reflect and kind of like, oh, I never seen this in this way. So that's my CTA. For somebody else, it might be selling a course or,
Yeah.
subscribing to a list, like I said. So it all revolves around that. But I would say the title, the image, and your CTA at the end, like when they are done reading, what do you want them to do? They're done. So
Yeah.
now what? they're going to follow you, they're going to like it, they're going to click more. So that's all at the end of the day the goal for us.
Yeah. And you're talking there about the visual element as well.
So
What
important.
tools are out there for people to if they want to elevate the visual element of their post, whether it's for social media or whatever it is? What tools do you use?
So for my personal business and the images that I create, I use tools like Canva or like Photoshop, but like 101, level one. I'm no expert at Photoshop, so I just use like the basics of it. But Canva is super easy to use. There's so many templates, so it really depends again on the client. I've had people who tell me, I love your kind of like cartoons or illustrations. There are people who tell me I don't really like cartoons. I'd rather have like real people images on it.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on what you're looking for. There's a really great site that's called pexels.com, and you can get images there, like real people images, let's say, for free, and they're super great quality, and you know they bring a more professional look to what you're looking for. But then again, it all depends on the brand and the business and what they're trying to convey. So in my case, I
Yeah.
just like to stick with the funny, weird designs that I put on, and people might be like, "Why is there a clock here?" And then they just read the caption, they're like, "Oh, okay, now I get it." So I like to make people think that way, but it all depends on the business.
Yeah. No, certainly those two are both Canva and Pexels are ones that I use as well. And
Hmm.
the as soon I think initially they can be very intimidating or come across as intimidating, but as soon as you get your head around them,
Yeah,
they are very, very powerful. And as a hospitality leader, whether you are actually doing this work or inspiring others to do,
yeah,
it doesn't actually take you that long to get your head around them or understand how they work so that you can encourage people then to do
exactly.
this in your business. Because what it does do is it makes the whole process, it streamlines the process in a way. Even Canva, there's so many things that are on there already that people
So
can
many things.
use that you
Yeah,
actually don't even need to go to Pexels all the time. But there are other things on there,
exactly.
obviously, that
Yeah,
some, different things. So
yeah.
definitely one thing that I would say to people is get to know these bits of software that, well, they're both free at the basic level,
Hmm.
aren't they? You don't have to even invest in anything up front. So definitely lots to learn from them
Yeah.
and to implement in our business. Now, if someone is at that stage where they aren't necessarily 100% comfortable with the copywriting process, maybe they've done a few posts, randomly written a post and put it out there. What would be your three tips for someone who is just starting out on this journey of developing their copywriting skills, whether it's for their business or a personal brand even? What would you suggest? Where would you suggest people start?
To start. So three things. Number one, and from the top of my head, like I said, just be authentic. Like there's so much content out there. There's so much information. Everybody's doing their own thing. So just stick to your voice. Stick to your story. What are you trying to tell? For me, that would be number one. Just be authentic, and that's where you sit down with yourself and be like, okay, what is my business trying to do for people? How am I different from, the rest of the hospitality copywriters or just copywriters in general? In my case. So for me, be authentic and sticking to your voice would be number one. Number two, and like you said, Andy, do not be afraid of using the tools that we have. Like I said, also, that's not my expertise. I am no graphic designer. I didn't go to school for marketing or any of that. But you learn along the way. It's almost like hospitality. You get thrown in the water
Mhm.
and you learn how to
Yeah,
swim, but you gotta get in the water. So I would say do not be afraid. You're gonna, maybe your first designs are not gonna be great, but then you're gonna learn and you're gonna get better.
yeah,
And that's what happened to me as well. It didn't just happen overnight or nothing happens like that. So my
yeah.
first ones, and I look back on them, I'm like, oh, that those weren't great. But now I'm like, okay, now I know how to do a little bit better. So like I said, it's a never ending learning journey,
Yeah.
doing all of this. So do not be afraid is the second one. And the third one, I would say be be relatable. Like talk about something that makes people remember something,
Yeah.
pull a string, Do not focus only on the numbers. And like I said, statistics are great, and you know, they are half of the business. So they are important, but just focus on something that people can find something within themselves to connect to your business. So it's not just about sales and trying to book a night or trying to make a reservation. Just talk about something that will make people feel connected. So those three things I would personally advise to anybody who's looking into this.
Yeah, I would double down on what you've said there about just getting the process started, get your content out there.
Exactly.
I know certainly for me, I struggled, it's a totally massively uncomfortable thing to do, is to put yourself out there, even if it's for your business.
So,
you still feel that connection, and
Yep.
and you're right, you learn over time, you constantly are changing how you do things, your style is changing, developing that authentic, as you say, that authentic brand voice really takes time, and it
100%.
takes you time to settle into it. And
Yep.
what you think as well is that, and you're critical of your own work. I'm the same. You'll know exactly that same feeling. A lot of people don't always notice the same things that we do. So get it out there, learn. Ultimately, people need to do this. It's a skill that is not going away anytime soon, that people need.
Yeah, and like I said, when I started, I was scared to death. I have never posted anything online. It was weird to me to think that somebody else across the nation could read some of my stuff, but I was like, I have to do it or I'll never get started. You just gotta get there. So I maybe got lucky because it was my first article that got, the 200,000 views now. But I had a couple that are not as good, and now I'm like, okay, now I know how I can improve this, but I only did it and I only know because I throw myself in there. So that's just really the thing. Like you said, it is uncomfortable, but comfort zones are only good for a little bit, and then you just gotta get out there and expand that zone.
Yeah, and that is precisely the call to action, as we've been talking about for this episode, is just get started. Now, I ask everyone, especially because the majority of people know the power that there is in books now. What is one book that you've read, whether it's recently or in your past, that has really had an impact on you? Doesn't have to be specifically to hospitality, just generally had a massive impact on your life, for example.
That's a tough question because I am a bit of a book reader. I love to read, so I have a couple in mind, but specifically to hospitality, or you said it doesn't have to be?
Oh, it doesn't have to be. No.
It can be, okay, it can just be a book.
Yeah.
I think, and that's just the top of my head. If I think about it, maybe I'll change it. But one of them is The Slight Edge. I don't know if you read it, Andy.
No.
It is really good. I just forgot about the name of the author, probably because I'm on the spot. But I have it right here on my nightstand. It's one of those books that you can just take your time to read each chapter and absorb the content. It's not a novel. It's not like you're going to inhale the book. But it is so powerful how the slight edge of, like we said, just doing things, just taking that step takes you so far ahead, and we might not see it in the moment, but then with time, that's what happens. And actually, this book was recommended to me when I first started, thinking about doing copywriting. I joined a course, so I did training for like a month and a half, online and everything, and that was one of the books that they recommended us for us to read. And I read it, and I was like, this is a life-changing book. So I'm gonna look it up, but The Slight Edge, get that book. So good.
Perfect. Now, listen, we've come towards the end now. What is it? Where can people find you first and foremost? And certainly if they want to work with you, where do they go? What do they need to do?
So my name is pretty easy online. You'll find me as Maria Writing. You'll find me on Instagram, Maria Writing. I have my own website, mariawriting.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well with the same name. So that's pretty much how you guys can find me. And I'm always there, answering and sharing and commenting. So that's an easy way to find me.
Perfect. Listen, Maria, thank you so much for serving our industry. Thank you for producing this content that is having an impact not only on me, I notice it, but everyone else is noticing it as well, and we resonate with it. So It really does make a massive difference. So thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your knowledge, your
Thank you,
experience
Andy.
with the Hospitality Leadership Podcast.